You can hear me all? Good. This is an important day for me, and I'll tell you why. When I was 6 years of age, I lived in a place in Dublin called Kilmacud. And there lived there a boy of 15 years of age whose only dream ever was to be in the army. From the age of that, I believe, all he ever wanted was. So at the ripe old age of 15, I should say, he joined what we have here called the FCA, which is it's an association that if you want to join the army, you can play soldier basically for the weekend. And he joined this establishment, the FCA, at 15. Now the normal age for that would be 17 years of age, but at 15 he was tall, he was 6 foot, so he was able to fake his age. In those days you could get away with basically anything, just a little bit of paper and maybe a letter from the priest, and sure, who knew what age you were anyway. So at 15 he had joined the FCA, and I would see him every Saturday evening coming up the road towards me in his uniform with a 303 rifle slung over the shoulder. Now folks, you can imagine a boy of 15 walking up the street with a rifle slung over the shoulder. Today you can't even have a penknife in your pocket, but he had, and nobody went near him, and it was an accepted thing because he'd have his uniform on. So on a Sunday morning early, he would get up, he would dress in his refinery, and you'd see him walking down the road, and his brass would be shining, his rifle would be gleaming, and he'd be dead straight, and his boots would be hopping off the road. And I would sneak out of the house. I was only a little boy, and I'd sneak out of the house without my parents ever hearing me, and I'd sidle up next to him, and he'd regale me with stories. And now I would walk next to this man, because that's, folks, what he was to me. He was a man. He was 15 years of age, but he was a man to me. And of course I was hoping that maybe one of my friends would be looking out their window and see me not walking next to this man's soldier. After a while, he'd get fed up with me, and he was heading off to mass, and he'd send me home, and I'd scurry home without my folks knowing, and I'd sneak in and back into bed, and nobody knew I had left the house. So by the ripe old age of 18, he had left school with a certificate that would have got him into any university in any degree course, but no, his mind was set the army. So he headed into the army, and at the age of 21, he came out as a second lieutenant, and a year later, he would have been made lieutenant. By the time he was 24, he was a fully fledged captain and married and living in Newbridge. Now, folks, he was a big man. He was 6'4". And I tell you, when he said something to you, you listened, because he had a very direct way of talking, but he never gave advice unless you asked for it. By the time he was 28, he was a fully fledged commandant, which in those days he was the youngest ever, very successful, but the army was his life. It was his dream. And apart from his wife and child, and at the time, the army came second. So much so that in his spare time, he would do everything that was military. He used to run to work, which was 9 miles. He would do parachuting in the weekends. In fact, on one particular occasion, he had parachuters and he got caught in the trees, and he was dangling from the trees. And this soldier came up to him and said, "Are you okay, sir?" And he says, "Ah, nuts." Not the word he used now, mind you. "Ah, nuts. Tell my wife I'm okay." Whereupon the soldier went back to his wife and said, "The captain would like to tell you that his nuts are okay, ma'am." By the time he was 33, he was adjutant of the Curragh, which was the training school for officers and that. And he got an opportunity then later on to go to Israel. And he joined the United Nations. And when he was over there, after a while, he was spotted basically. And he was brought into a group called UNSO, which is the investigation forum and of the UN. And I would say that he rose very quickly through the ranks. He used to send letters home to his parents, and he'd tell them all about the life he was having out there. And you must remember, there wasn't much communication in those days apart from letters. and because telephones were very expensive. So he would have sent letters, and in one particular letter, he talks about how he was able to lecture 60 international officers and tell them about his life. And he was giving them a lecture, a 2.5-hour lecture, whereupon at the end of the lecture, he asked, "Is there anything that you didn't understand that you'd like me to explain?" Whereupon a Chilean officer put his hand up and says, "Yes, please, after you said good morning, gentlemen." The last time I spoke to him was about 15 minutes before I got married. And he gave me the wisdom of marriage. For instance, that you must remember you will be the head of the family, and that it's your role as the head of the family. But remember, your wife is the neck, and she can turn the head any way she wants. And also, you don't have to understand your wife, you just have to love her. And with those wise words, I carried on into my life. And a few short months later, I was lying back in bed, and it was about 2 or 3 in the morning, and I got a phone call. And it was from his dad to tell me that Michael had died, and that he had been killed in a landmine in the Lebanon, and as he was going to investigate the massacre of 3,500 Palestinian refugees. They were Christian, and they were murdered in the camp in Shabla and Shantilla. Nobody knows what the circumstances were, but himself and 3 other officers died. And it would bring me back. His father now would say his father himself was a military man. And he wasn't a very emotional man, and very direct to himself, like his son. And it was years later when when he died, I was given these letters, which I never opened until a few years ago. And in it was a poem that he wrote to his dead son. And the poem goes something like this, only a short one. "They come a morning to our door, in praising of your name. They strive so gently o'er and o'er to kindle back the flame of the dead ashes in your heart and the dullness in your eyes. And when they've gone, your mam upon me leans and cries and cries. I look outside the window pane to hills and distant trees, to places like Slieve Rua, Sweetbriar Lane, and little things you said to me when you were just a chap with shining wondrous eyes. And when I turn, while teardrops burn, to where your mother cries." Now, folks, the reason why I'm telling you this story is because at 1 o'clock today, 38 years ago, that man died. And he left a legacy behind him. And although he died at the age of 36, he lived a very good life. He lived his dream, which I think is most important for all of us, to live our dream. Because he once said to me, "You know, there is no tomorrow." And at the time when he said it to me, I didn't know what he meant. But I certainly know what he means now, because there really is no tomorrow. And folks, his name was Commandant Michael Nestor. And he was my eldest brother. And I have to say, I miss him. Thank you.